with John Thompson. He's a health services consultant with the Washington State Department of Health, and he's going to be giving us a brief SCID update from Washington State. So I'll turn it over to John.
Very good. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak. We're very excited to share with you just real briefly where we've been and what's going on right now. So go ahead to the next slide. So I love this graphic, and an unnamed member of the Illinois House of Representatives back in the late 1800s said, "I've come to the conclusion that the making of laws is like the making of sausages. The less you know about the process, the more you respect the result." So you can go to the next slide. I'd like to lead you on a little timeline for how the sausage was made for us to be able to add SCID to our screening panel. So back in 2010, it was recommended for inclusion in the routine uniform screening panel, or the recommended uniform screening panel. And then internally, we put together a decision package, which is our basically what we tell the agency that we want to do something. We have to get it approved within the agency before we can take it outside. And in 2010, Washington's governor made a statement that there was going to be no new taxes that year, and so our decision package got halted because the interpretation of that was a screening fee increase would be seen as a tax. So we got stuck in 2010. So in 2011, when the CDC announced that they were going to do newborn screening for SCID grants, we applied, and we were very excited about that opportunity, and we came in third place. They funded 2 different programs. So we were upset or disappointed that we just barely missed it, but we continue on in our preparations for adding SCID. We convened the Newborn Screening Advisory Committee, which is an ad hoc committee, which reviewed the evidence and made a recommendation to the State Board of Health, who has the statutory authority to decide what's on our screening panel. So the State Board of Health in 2012 accepted that recommendation, but contingent on finding the funding necessary to implement it. So in 2013, we went back with a decision package. The CDC came through with another grant opportunity, which we applied for because we thought it might help us get a little bit faster started. We didn't get funded once again. Then next, the State Board of Health approved the change in the law, and then concurrently we had legislative approval to increase our fee. So that allowed us to start screening January 2014. We would have so at the beginning of the year we started our program. Next slide. So in the time intervening, we did a lot of preparations. We wanted to be able to hit the ground running, and that preparation really paved the way for us to get started without any hiccups in the process. So Tim Davis is our lead worker who was assigned to prepare for the TREC testing, and in his different opportunities, he went to 5 different laboratories, including CDC's lab, and saw what methods were being used in those different programs. We were able to creatively finance purchasing one via 7 and the basic the basic supplies that we would need to get the TREC assay up and running on a pilot basis before we had the authority to screen. So we purchased a limited amount of equipment just so that we could test out the assay. And Tim had this idea that he could take some of the strengths of the different assays that were in different programs and create a hybrid method to improve the efficiency of the analysis. So that's what we did before we had the authority, and then once we got the green light, we were up and running, purchasing equipment. He knew exactly what it was that he wanted, and he had quotes and everything. So next slide. The highlights, I asked Tim to kind of put it together for us as far as just one slide of what really is different with what we're doing than other programs. So we have a simple extraction method with few steps at a low cost. So we're analyzing on a VS7 thermocycler with 384 well reaction plates, and we're using 10 microliters for our reaction volume. So the master mix is it's a unique master mix cocktail that we've put together, and it's been optimized by maximizing the primer and probe efficiency in a multiplex reaction along with beta-actin. So we're doing them together. And he really worked to figure this out so that, or by increasing the concentrations of the Trek forward and reverse primers and reduce the amount of beta-actin forward primer, and that allowed, it really helped optimize our efficiency for the primer and probes. And then we use a 7-point Trek plasmid standard curve in triplicate, and the standards are prepared in large volumes and transferred to PCR strips, and they're stored frozen to maintain their stability. So that's a little bit about our methods. Our cutoffs are on this table. So we have anything greater than 80 is normal Trek values. If we have less than or equal to 80, we check the beta-actin to make sure that the DNA amplification happened. If we have abnormal CQ there, then we know that we need to repeat the test or get a new specimen because the DNA amplification didn't happen. But we have a borderline range and a presumptive range, and currently this is where it stands. I think as time goes on that the cutoff between borderline and presumptive will go lower because I believe that as we're learning more, we'll be able to couch more of them into the borderline range, which is a little less aggressive follow-up. The presumptives, we're calling to recommend diagnostic testing and coordinating with the immunologist at Children's Hospital, and they have a lab there that will do the flow cytometry and DNA analysis if needed. And then our last slide is just what has happened in the last 2 months. We've screened about 15,000 babies and so about 30,000 specimens. And of those, there were 9 that had abnormal Trek results, and they all were NICU kids. And of those 9, there were 3 that fell into the presumptive range. One baby was a transfer from another state who had congenital heart defects and needed surgery. One baby was diagnosed with DeGeorge syndrome. They were suspecting that based on the clinical presentation, but our results helped expedite that diagnosis. And then the diagnosis is still pending for the final baby who has DeGeorge-like symptoms. They're not quite sure what's going on with that baby. So far, it's going quite well. We have a strong relationship with our immunologists. They've been chomping at the bit with us since 2010 and excited about the fact that we're finally up and running, and we're looking forward to continuing our screening. That's all we have.
Great. Thanks so much, John. So as I said earlier, we're going to hold questions till the very end to give everybody, all of the speakers, enough time to present. Everybody's on mute, so if you do have questions, feel free to type them as you think about it, and I'll just read them aloud at the end after everybody's had a chance to present. But next, we're going to hear from Elisa Feuchtbaum. She's the Chief of the Program Development and Evaluation Section within the Genetic Disease Screening Program of the California Department of Public Health. So I'll pass it on to Lisa.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Leanne. And yeah, my slides are going to present a little bit more of the experience that we've had screening for SCID since we came up around mid-2010, and now the data I'm presenting goes through the end of 2013. And it is a brief overview, but it'll give you a sense of the how many disorders we've detected, the birth prevalence based on the data, some of the issues about how many babies have died, some of the contributing factors, and then just some descriptive information about the actual births in terms of birth weight, gestational age, days at collection, and mean, median, and the range of TREC values for the different SCID-related disorders. So why don't we begin with that next slide? Thank you. Okay. So here, actually in my total, I actually didn't put a total, but there are 86 babies that were identified with one of the SCID-related disorders, and then for each of these disorder categories that I've listed, I put the number. So for example, the classic SCID cases, we've had 25, and I'm showing you the distribution across the years, and it was really interesting that in 2013 we had 12. So there is, this may just be a kind of random variation when you're dealing with small numbers. It'll be very interesting to see what the numbers are looking like in 2014. But so for the classic SCID, the birth prevalence rate is just about 1 in 67,000. And then you can see the total at the bottom, which is the 86 cases identified out of what is the denominator is 1.7 million, approximately 1.7 million babies screened during the 2.5 years. And so we're seeing an overall prevalence of SCID-related disorders of about 1 in 20,000. So, and then you can see there's variation in between depending on the type of category. The syndromes with T-cell impairment is coming in close to the classic SCID at also about 1 in 70,000. So we thought this would just be helpful for people to get a sense of the magnitude of the number of disorders that we're picking up with the screening program. But I guess the take-home message is 1 in 20,000 when you put all the types of SCID-related disorders that we're picking up. So let's go to the next slide. So here I've indicated among the different types of SCID-related disorders how many of the children that we know of to date had a stem cell transplant, essentially. And so 18 of the 25 classic SCID cases underwent stem cell transplant. And my understanding is that all are doing well. Unfortunately, there were 2 deaths in that group. And some of the contributing factors was related to the classic SCID cases. There was a postnatal CMV infection, and then the other death was due to some complication of the treatment. So the other group that has had stem cell transplants were the leaky SCID or Omen syndrome cases. All of them had stem cell transplant. There were no deaths in that group. Now, there were no stem cell transplants in the other 3 categories of SCID-related disorders, but there were children that did die, and I indicated the contributing factors. So with the among the group of variant SCID cases, this is also called the idiopathic T-cell lymphopenia, because I think they get resolved as more specific type of diagnoses later on. But there was, as you can see, a non-immune related medical problem that contributed to one of the deaths, and another death was indicated as due to the condition. So The syndromes with T-cell impairment, there were 32 of those. There were 4 deaths in the group. 3 of the deaths were complicated by Down syndrome. I don't know the details if it was specifically related to heart defect or other complications. And then a disorder known as Fryns syndrome. And then there were also 2 deaths in the non-preterm secondary T-cell lymphoma group among those 14. So, and those were complicated by congenital heart disease and an interesting disorder, which I had to look it up. I won't go into, you could look it up if you want. It's something that I wasn't familiar with, but it's called third spacing syndrome. So overall, among the 10, we had 10 deaths in total among the 89 SCID-related disorders diagnosed. So that's looking like overall about 11% mortality rate. And I don't have the details of the treatments that were provided to the non-SCID and non-leaky SCID Omenn syndrome cases. So, but so that's kind of a snapshot of some of the experience we've had with the stem cell treatment and the mortality rates. So then my last slide, we'll go through. Thank you. So again, I have the disorder, SCID-related case type listed in the first column. And I just thought you may be interested in seeing some little features, more demographic type information about these different types of SCID-related cases. So I've indicated the mean and median birth weight in grams, as you can see, for each, and the gestational age, the days at collection, the % male, and then I thought this may be of more interest to people, the mean and median and the range of TREC counts by these groupings, and then lastly the % TREC count that were equal, where the TREC count was actually equal to 0. So, so for example, let's start with SCID, the 25 cases. The mean and median birth weight didn't stand out to me as being hugely different either across the disorder types, but it's not very different from probably the normal population. It's perhaps a little lower, and the gestational age you can see was 38.2 as the mean, and the median was 39. So they're full-term, mostly full-term babies. Days of collection pretty much across the board except for that last category of non-preterm secondary T-cell lymphoma, those 14 cases. That's the one group that kind of stands out as different from the others with respect to some of these parameters that I'm presenting. But you can see that the days of collection was, the median was 1 day, and leaky SCID was 2 days. And that was pretty consistent. The syndromes group, you had a little bit more variability. The mean was 4.2 days, but the median was 2. So, and again, that last group is kind of the outlier with respect to these parameters. The median was 4 days for the non-preterm secondary T-cell lymphoma, and there must have been a few outliers there because the mean is 18 days. Looking just at sex, gender, it is interesting. There seems to be more males in the SCID, classic SCID group and the variant SCID, but again, small numbers. We'll have to see if these trends stand the test of time as we get more data. And then looking at the TREC counts, basically what we found, if you look at across all these disorders, the TREC count was really in the range of 0 to 26, again, across all disorders. And you can see, I guess as a better summary, the % of the TREC counts equal to 0 was highest in the classic SCID group. So 76% of the 25 cases actually had a TREC count of 0. And there was some variability between 0 and 15 for the classic SCID cases. And then And then you could see the TREC counts, summaries, and the percent equal to 0 varies by the other disorders. But I think the take-home message is that in any of these SCID-related cases, the TREC count was the highest that we observed was 26. So they're very low TREC counts. And that's pretty much all I prepared. I don't have that much more detail to share, but I was hoping that this gives a flavor for the birth prevalence rate and some of the experiences and characteristics of the children being diagnosed with these disorders. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Lisa. So the last person to present today is Cheryl Hermerath. She's the Newborn Screening Manager with the Northwest Regional Newborn Screening Program and the Oregon State Public Health Laboratory. So I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you for letting us give an update on what's going on in Oregon for the Northwest Regional Newborn Screening Program. We are not anywhere near where California is in SCID, and I think we're on the coattails of Washington. I don't have any data or slides to present to you today. I just thought I'd give you a quick recap of the activities that we've done over the last couple of years and where we're headed. And so to start with, in 2013, we actually started to go through and review what protocols were available from the other states and pulled together that information and started to review what we thought might or might not work within our own program. We also at that time started to review what vendors and instrument providers were available for newborn screening applications for SCID. Along that timeline, we actually made a trip, myself and Mike Skeels, to Troy Torgerson's lab in Seattle, and that provided us with more information on the procedures. We had an actual demonstration as well as information on the instrumentation and things that they were using in their laboratory. In addition, we don't have any pediatric immunologists in the state of Oregon, but we do have two very strong advocates who are transplant specialists at the Oregon Health and Science University. That's Anita Nemechek and Evan Shrek. And they have actually come and given us a talk about SCID, and they're the two people who are moving forward with us as medical consultants to move forward with anything we identify in our program in the near future, and they'll be following through. Potential expertise may be drawn from Seattle as well, but it'll be left up to those consultants to decide on how they want to do that. To get started on pulling together the procedures and the instruments that we were looking for, I actually brought together not only a lead employee microbiologist here in our laboratory, but we pulled an employee from our virology immunology section here at the State Public Health Laboratory. And this person actually has the molecular background and spent some time pulling together the instrumentation that she felt we needed, plus the process. And she's been going through and helping us identify everything that we need. With her assistance, we went through and started to make preliminary purchases of the small dollar items. So that's some of the equipment, refrigerators, freezers, hoods, and that kind of thing. And then at the same time, I actually had both her, the virology immunology person, and the lead worker, Sharon Willis, here in the laboratory, go to CDC in December of last year and work with Francis Lee. And they went through some SCID training with him and came back with more ideas of what they felt would be applicable to our laboratory and the processes here. In 2014, we're fairly new into it. However, we've been very active. We put in some new administrative rules. They were introduced to not only update some newborn screening program components, but to actually also add SCID to our panel of disorders, and then to increase our fee to cover the cost of SCID. And at this point, we opted to raise the fee by $10 to a total of $64 per infant. And those administrative rules are currently posted for public comment, and so far I have received no negatives, only positives about adding SCID to the testing panel. For the larger dollar items, we have to go through a very stringent procurement process, and that is and has been initiated to bring on the extractors and any large ticket items. And so we are following through on that, and I'm keeping close eye on it because we're under a short timeline, and I'll give you that in just a minute. To be completed, we actually do have to work on pulling together the contract arrangements with our medical consultants so that they are part of the program and provide the 24/7 coverage that we require of our medical consultants with our program. We do need to look at developing the follow-up algorithms. Are those going to be similar to what we already do, or something similar? Or, sorry, something different compared to the needs that SCID might identify. We also are going to have to work on notifying all of our submitters, beginning with Oregon, that we are adding SCID and that there will be some changes to the test panel, the reporting, etc. And that will be part of the follow-up and the education piece. We will have to go through and pull together a finalization of the operating procedure, the method that we're going to be using, and then bringing all of the equipment in to validate that and making sure that we actually can or cannot detect TREX in order to identify SCID cases. One of the other issues that we're facing right now is bringing on computer interfacing for the data download of all of that information. And we have preliminary work going on with PerkinElmer and Neometrics both to be able to interface with the instrumentation in order to do that. Our goal is to actually have the two lead workers take over SCID to begin with, and then eventually, as part of our program, every one of the technicians in the laboratory rotates into all of the different testing areas, and eventually we'll have all of them cross-trained, so they'll be doing molecular as well as all of the other routine tests that are done here in the lab. So the online target date for us currently, and that's what is listed in the administrative rules, is May 1st of this year. So we have a very tight timeline and a lot going on. April will probably be an extremely busy month for us. So the next steps in looking at the regional program overall, normally we will bring on new testing with Oregon and our clients from there and submitters from there. And then we begin to offer the test to all of our other states or submitters within the regional program. In the past, when we've done tandem mass spectrometry, I think it took us about a year to get everybody online. When we added cystic fibrosis, that was about 6 months. So at this point, I'm not sure how long it's going to take us. Depends on each of the states and their requirements and where they're at in their process. But we will bring them online as they're prepared to do so. And then, as many of you know, besides the states, we also do some testing from the Navajo Nation and their health centers. And they are very interested in making sure that we can bring this up fairly quickly for them because they're either contracting it out or they have not yet started it. And the Navajo Nation seems to have a higher incidence of SCID based on the information that we've been told. So that's just kind of all of the things that fall into place. I'm sure both Washington and California have gone through something similar. We are just getting started, but hopefully by the summer we'll have some data ourselves to present. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And I just want to thank our 3 presenters for speaking today. I know they're all very busy, not just with newborn screening, but setting up and running their newborn screening for SCID. So if anybody has any questions for any of our 3 speakers, for John, Lisa, or Cheryl, please feel free to type it into the question box, and I'll be happy to read it out loud for any of our speakers here. And while you're thinking about your question, again, I just want to remind everybody that we have a SurveyMonkey survey that was sent out via email. It'll take you to a link to help us at the Western States better figure out how to make our webinars and our educational sessions more useful to all of you. So any questions? And it looks like I'm not getting any. I'm just checking. Yeah, nope, doesn't look like there are any questions. You guys must have been just very clear in your presentations. So again, I just want to thank everybody for joining our webinar and for our speakers. We did record the session, so the recording of the session will be available on our website soon. If you do think of any questions later on, feel free to email me and I'll get them to the appropriate people. And so again, I just want to thank John, Lisa, and Cheryl for taking time out today to update us on their SCID screening, and to all of you for joining us today. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.